Welcome to my World History Notes, where I read from the book that I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. It's kind of a survey of world history. You can find it on lulu.com, amazon.com, or at the Bible Baptist bookstore, or follow me here. So I'm going to be talking today a little bit about China, Africa, and then some about Europe. So we'll get started. And I draw conclusions about historical events. You won't agree with my conclusions, but you should know about the events and people and places and concepts and ideas I talk about. So in China, we're then for we know back about the first century. Moving to China, we have Wang Mang, the socialist emperor ruling from 5 AD to 25 AD. Buddhism comes to China around 67 AD, and around 100 AD, we have the first known manufacture of paper in that culture. The Han Dynasty flourishes from 206 BC to 221 AD. Wang Mang was a reformer who was known as the consummate gentleman who distributed his income among his friends and the poor. He lived frugally, but was a patron to scholars and to the arts. He surrounded himself not with politicians, but with scholars and artists as well as philosophers. He abolished all slavery remaining in nationalized land, dividing it into equal tracts among the peasants. He forbade the sale or purchase of private property and continued state monopolies on iron and salt and added to them government ownership of mines and state control of alcoholic beverages. In addition, he also fixed prices for commodities. The government itself made grants and loans for any productive purpose. However, Wang failed to understand man's inherent greed and lust for power. He worked long hours to try to improve his kingdom and was heartbroken when social disorder prevailed. Natural disasters, so normal in China, continued to work against his planned economy. Revolts broke out among his people. These revolts were probably financed by the wealthy who resented his rule. The Xiongnu, whom we know as the Huns in the West, overran the northern provinces. These people, according to ancient historian Sima Qian, were descendants of Shen Wei of the old Jia family, although archaeologists dispute this due to the variety of Xiongnu burial structures, making any understanding of their origins complicated and difficult to confirm. Finally, the rich Liu family led a general rebellion and slew Wang Mang, annulling his reforms and returning everything to its former corrupt state. The Han Dynasty ended in a series of weak emperors and chaos. And I apologize to any Chinese people. I'm mispronouncing names. I'm not good at pronouncing some names in history, but I do apologize for that. So now let's go to Africa, just for a real brief statement right now. In Africa, many historians credit the first century with the beginning of the excuse me, of the first East African city-states that were so powerful and important until the great worldwide plague that devastated the ancient world 5 centuries later. The kingdom of Aksum was listed by the Persian writer and Christian heretic Mani, along with Rome, Persia, and China, as one of the four great powers of his time in the 3rd century AD. There is little record of established ancient kingdoms in West Africa at this time, but this may be more due to a lack of written form of language in these areas than a lack of activity. Let's go back to Europe. According to J.M. Roberts, in his A History of Europe, 1997 Penguin Books, the Celtic people of Central Europe, before they were conquered by Julius Caesar and their lands made a part of the Roman Empire, were not quite the barbarians that the Romans portrayed them to be. Some of their languages still survive on the fringes of Europe. Also known as Gauls, we today have the vestiges of Irish and Scots Gaelic language. They were skilled iron workers, Roberts tells us, and attained a high level of technical ability and artistic achievement. They eventually covered Europe from Britain to Spain to even northern Italy, where they came in conflict with the rising Latin state. The Greeks called them Keltoi, while the Romans called them Galli, both of which have come down to us as Celts and Gauls were the same people. They were considered to be warriors of great ability and enthusiasm, and the Romans often described them by their individual tribal names, such as Belgae, Helvetii, Allobroges, among others. Sorry about the mispronunciations. You have to look them up. They shared physical characteristics such as the Celtic Roman heroine Boadicia's red hair and may have felt some ethnic sense of brotherhood above the tribal level, but there was never a political unity that had a chance of overcoming or resisting Rome. By the first century, they had been, for the most part, conquered. Russia, like Africa, did not come into great importance until much later due to scattered tribal loyalties and a lack of political cohesion, plus the severeness of the climate and the variety of said climate and terrain over a vast territory. The Slavic people that we know today as the backbone of Russia were preceded by the Scythians mentioned by Paul in Colossians 3:11. We go to Nicholas Ryazanovsky's 1993 edition of his 1963 work, A History of Russia, to learn that the Scythians were defeated and overtaken by the Sarmatians. The Scytho-Sarmatian culture was heavily influenced by the Greek-speaking world of Alexander and his political descendants. Eventually, a Germanic people known as the Goths overthrew these Slavic peoples. They divided into the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths and ruled southern Russia from 200 AD when they overran the Scytho-Sarmatians until about 370 AD when they were replaced by the Huns. Northern Europe in the 1st century AD included Rome and Britain, which took nearly the entire century to subdue, Gaul, now also under Roman authority, and the Germanic people north and just outside of Rome's control, but with a great deal of trading and interaction with Rome. Spain, also recently completely conquered, lies within the borders of the Roman Empire in the 1st century, having been completely conquered by Augustus' deputy Agrippa in 19 BC, according to Raymond Carr's Spain, A History. Augustus divided the peninsula in 3 provinces: Baetica, Hispania, from which we get the word Spain, and Lusitania, which comprises modern Portugal. By 26 AD, the region was basically at peace, and only 1 Roman legion maintained law and order there. In comparison, Britain required no fewer than 3 legions to police it. By 71 AD, Vespasian had granted the communities of Spain full rights within the empire as citizens, and Rome went on a fantastic building spree in this province. The Roman Empire's impressive 119-arch aqueduct was built at Segovia, and the Alcantara Bridge, which crossed the Tagus River at the height of 150 feet, that's 15 stories tall, was Rome's highest bridge. Roman law ruled supreme in the 1st century. The Pax Romana, or Roman peace, enforced by a legion of soldiers, helped Spain to prosper in a way it did not do again until its plunder of the Americas began over 1,400 years later. Turning to the book, A History of the Vikings, written by Gwyn Jones, we learned that Augustus had sent an expedition beyond the Rhine and around Jutland, coming into contact with several Germanic and Scandinavian people. The Cimbri, among others, sent delegations to Rome and exchanged ambassadors. In Nero's reign, another fleet entered the Baltic Sea. This was around 60 AD. Pliny the Elder wrote in his Natural History that in the Bay Codanus beyond Jutland, there are a great many islands, the largest of which was Scandinavia, which scholars believe to be the southernmost part of the Scandinavian peninsula. By the end of the 1st century, Tacitus had identified a prominent tribe of this region as being the Suones, not only distinguished by their powerful warriors, but by their impressive fleets of ships. Modern scholars assume these to be the Svea, or Swedes, of the upland in central Sweden. 50 years later, the geographer Ptolemy draws a rough map of the area and calls the further island of 4 beyond Jutland Scandia. It is 400 years before anyone else attempts to understand what lies within the realm of what we call Scandinavia today. Returning to the continent that bears the name of the Roman province that occupied a tiny part of its northern border with the Mediterranean Sea, called Africa, we have a similar situation in regard to Asia. The entire continent is named after a relatively small portion, which occupies what is now called Asia Minor, or the country of Turkey. The province of Africa contained parts of modern-day Tunisia, Algeria, and Libya, which came under Rome's control after the Third Punic War with Carthage. Now, we're going to go to a very important city next in the Roman Empire called Alexandria before we jump over to the Americas. So thank you for watching, and I hope you do some study in world history, and hope you're able to get the pronunciations right. I apologize for that. Thank you.